Random thoughts. In this video, I'm going to talk about how the Ethiopian Orthodox Church had to fight to get its independence back. That's after losing it for at least maybe about a decade. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church lost its independence as a price that Abyssinia had to pay to win the war that it was fighting with the Sultanate of Adal. And this, of course, happened between 1520s to around 1540 something or 1541 when Ahmed bin Ibrahim al-Ghazi or Gurei was killed in Ethiopia. And of course, the Ethiopians emerged, or the Abyssinians, because Ethiopia didn't exist then as we know it today. The Abyssinians won this war. Basically, they had lost it, but then they won it, of course, with the help of the Portuguese. But then they had to pay a huge price. And this huge price came in the form of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church losing its independence. Now, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church has been or was a state religion for a very long time. It became the state religion around the year 330 AD, and this is when the king of Axum by the name Ezana converted to Christianity. Now, for many years, of course, there was no challenge to the authority of the church in the politics of the empire. And then, of course, then we have the war with Adal, and then the Portuguese come, of course, to help Abyssinia win this war. Now, during this time, Abyssinians were so desperate to get this help, and because of that, they ended up forming an alliance, of course, with the Portuguese. But then slowly, the Portuguese started playing some games on them, and the Portuguese were not acting alone. The Portuguese were basically doing work for the Pope, that is the Catholic Church, and the Portuguese starts coming into the palace, of course, starting slowly and doing this and that and trying to persuade the king. Initially, they were not having any success of trying to convert the Ethiopians into Catholicism, but they slowly were able to bring themselves to power through the Jesuits. And we know the Jesuits is an arm of the Catholic Church, of course, that is sent out to perform some functions when need arises. And the Jesuits were in Ethiopia for a while, and for a very long time they were not succeeding at getting the Ethiopians to become part of the Catholic Church. But since the end of the war with the Adal Sultanate, the Jesuits had managed to get a lot of control in the palace, and they were having a lot of leeway when it came to policy of the state. But the one thing they were struggling to achieve is to make Ethiopians become Catholic and the Ethiopian Orthodox Church to basically submit to the Pope. That they were not achieving. And that went on for a very long time. And it seems like at some point, the people at the palace had basically given in to what the Jesuits wanted, but the population outside will not be persuaded to accept, to abandon their traditions and their church and basically now move on and become part of the Catholic Church. That became like something that was so difficult to cross over. This campaign, as I've said, started with the fall of Gurei, who was, of course, the Imam of Adal. And of course, the Portuguese from that point, of course, as I've said, continued getting themselves into positions of power in Ethiopia and trying to influence how things were working. And of course, as I've said, they did not have success, but they did have success. It was small success. Initially, they were able to persuade the people at the court to accept that Catholic was like the larger body of the Christian organization, and the Ethiopian church needed to be under that. But of course, as I've said, while the leaders seemed like they were buying that, and mostly it was out of desperation to get support, the population could not be persuaded. Now, things changed when Susenyos became the emperor, that is Susenyos I. Now, Susenyos I became the emperor in 1607, and Susenyos I was born around 1571. It was like 30 years after the end of the war with Adal. But during this time, when he is born, the Jesuits had established themselves in Abyssinia. They had land, they had really established themselves in Abyssinia. Now, Susenyos is born, and then he fights a war like many other rulers of Abyssinia. He wasn't given the throne. He really fought for it. He went into the bush and he fought. And by the year 1607, he had won the battle or the war, and he was coronated or made to be the emperor of Abyssinia. Now he becomes the emperor, and the Jesuits are around. The Jesuits have land. The Jesuits have established themselves in Abyssinia around this time. Now, few more people are sent to try to persuade him to become Catholic and to convert the entire nation to become Catholic. And one of these people was a guy who went by the name Pedro Paez. Now, Pedro Paez was a Jesuit, of course, and he became very close to Ceseños. He was very close to him, and he would give him advice on diplomatic matters, especially regarding the relationship between Abyssinia and European powers, in particular Portugal and Spain, and of course the Holy See, Rome. And but he was there on a mission. He had been sent specifically by the Pope to try to see how he can make Socinius the first convert to Catholicism. Now, initially, Socinius kind of like was not taking it or was not accepting that proposal, but at some point he accepted to convert. And that was around the year 1622. Now, in 1622, Socinius the first converts. And about 2 years later, he declares, or he makes an official declaration that now the Ethiopian Orthodox Church was under the Catholic Church. And of course, the Pope was happy about that. The Catholic organization as a whole was happy about that, because they were having one of the oldest branches of Christianity fall under their rule. But of course, the population could not take it, especially when they started being forced to abandon some of the traditions that they had for centuries, among those being the observance of the Sabbath. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church has the tradition of observing the Sabbath and also Sunday as holy days. So they started being discouraged from observing the Sabbath and to just focus on Sunday and many other traditions that they were being encouraged to abandon. And that, of course, did not make the people happy at all. But of course, Ceseños, just like his predecessors, still had issues that he needed help with, especially from Portugal and Rome. And the main issue he was dealing with at that point was the rebellion by the Oromo people, who were becoming very difficult to control around this time. And so, because he wanted that help from Portugal and Spain and Rome, he of course gave in, and he made this declaration. But then now he created a problem for himself, because the people, as I've said, were not willing to continue being forced to abandon some of the traditions that they were used to for centuries. And it is because of this that some people started open rebellion. And these are, besides, of course, the Oromo people, these were also the Amhari and other ethnic groups in the empire who decided that they were not going to take it. They were not going to abandon their traditions to become Catholics. And they rose and they started a war and they started fighting. And just about 10 years after making the declaration that Ethiopia was going to be under the Catholic Church, Socinius the first had to abdicate. And after abdicating, his son Fasilides took over. And when his son took over, he rolled back everything his father had done, especially regarding the adoption of Catholic as the state religion. And he exiled all the Jesuits from Ethiopia. And the Ethiopian Orthodox Church retained its power, and it continued remaining to be the state religion, a position that it held officially, we can say, up to maybe 1974. So that's how the Ethiopian Orthodox Church had to fight to retain its independence. And if it were not successful during that time, most likely today we will not have the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Most likely we will have just Catholic Church in Ethiopia. Those are my random thoughts.